All right, welcome everybody to our third spring webinar through Jewish Teen Education and Engagement Network. I am thrilled to introduce you to Rabbi Mike Uram. He is the Executive Director and Campus Rabbi at Penn Hillel. He is also the author of the bestseller, Next Generation Judaism, How College Students and Hillel Can Help Reinvent Jewish Organizations. I was a Hillel professional, so I know this work quite well, and I've seen it in action. And I also read his book actually after my time at Hillel and fell in love with engagement work all over again, and have been using much of his terminology actually since then. What I loved as I grabbed some information off the Penn Hillel website, I'm taking a quote from there, which said, "This book is for any leader who feels stuck." And I think all of us can feel stuck sometimes. So it's open for anybody. He's got a BA from Wash U in St. Louis and his rabbinical ordination from JTS. And without further ado, Mike.
Great, thank you so much. Do we want to go around and do quick introductions of like name and maybe like just highlight of like what you do? Like I work at a synagogue, I work at synagogue youth, I work at JCC youth. I don't know exactly the structure of everyone's job, and just so we can kind of get names and basic locations.
Perfect. So let me go around the circle and I'll unmute you as we go, and you guys can let Mike know who you are. So we will start with Fred.
Fred Nagler from Bergen County, New Jersey, principal and director of the Bergen County High School of Jewish Studies for the last, for 32 years.
Great.
And Rick.
I'm the director of religious education at Congregation Bethel in South Orange, New Jersey. And we really basically have programs from K through 12.
Awesome.
Okay.
Deb.
Hi, Deborah Massey. I work in the Bay Area. I have been a director of education and a day school director and a camp director. And right now I am working for our teen initiative. So I work through Jewish Learning Works, which is like our BJE here in the Bay Area. And my role is to support our youth professionals with professional development.
Got it. Great.
Paula.
Hey, Paula.
Hey, Mike. Hi, I'm Lori Stone's sister. I think we overlapped at JTS as well.
Yeah, I remember you, of course.
Yeah. Hi.
And
I'm the director of at Syracuse's Hebrew High School. We pulled from 4 synagogues: Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox.
Great.
And I do cantorial work also, but that's for here. That's what I do.
Susan, I'm trying to unmute you, but it's not letting me. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I got it. Hi, I'm Susan Weiss. I'm down the shore in Atlantic County, New Jersey. I run the Board of Jewish Education. Part of my job there is as director of our Hebrew High School program, Kulanu. Additionally, I run the PJ Library program as well as youth advisor at our synagogue. So lots of hats and lots of kids.
Great.
And Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jen Schwartz. I'm in Phoenix, and I I'm the founder of, it's called J-Teen Connect, and it is a central hub of all things Jewish teen throughout the greater Phoenix. We try to raise awareness and promote all of the programs going on across the valley to get a higher level of teen engagement, and also to help increase, we're working to try and increase program quality among our various teen organizations so that when we get teens to try their programs, they want to come back.
Great.
And Leanne.
I'm here.
Who are you? What do you do?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Leanne Blue. I'm from Congregation Beth Shalom in Northbrook, Illinois. I'm the Director of Jewish Life and Learning. I do adult education and family programming, as well as Hebrew High School and over 55s.
Great.
All right.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. What I would love for this to be is, so the pieces of the book I think could be helpful and provocative in so many ways for each of the different types of organizations that you're working in. I think an hour is a limited amount of time to try to get there. So what I'm going to try to do is to throw out a little bit of theory that will be provocative and have time to play with it and to try to plug it into real life, into the real life work that you're doing. And I would say that because it's a relatively small group, right? There's 9 of us on the call. Like, this should be super fun, interactive. The more you talk, the more you interrupt, the more you say, I disagree with you, it actually works this way, I think the better. My theory about what my role is in these kind of webinars is that I work in an organization that is far from perfect, where we struggle in all sorts of different ways. And I understand the full complexity of Penn Hillel. I don't understand the full complexity of the work that you do. And I think the role that I can play, given that I'm not in the weeds with you, is to provoke and to push and to try to get us to think about the same challenges that so many Jewish community organizations face, but to think about it from a different perspective. And I think that there are 3 outcomes that are all equally positive from my perspective. One is that you already know this stuff and you're like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been talking about. And this just gives you additional tools to push the board, to push the student leaders, to push the rabbi, to push the executive director, to move further along. The second outcome is that this could be mind-blowing. There are occasionally times where people are like, don't think this way about Jewish community, and that's fine. And I think the third outcome, which is you think I'm totally full of it. And because of my provocation, you say, he's totally wrong. This is actually the answer. I actually think the best staff trainings I've ever been to are where I disagree with everything, but in the process of reacting to what was said, I come up with new answers for myself. And I think that would also be a totally great outcome. So I get excited, but it's not because I believe that these are the answers, but I believe that these are good tools to nudge us to find new answers that can really help in the distinctive kind of work that we're doing. Fair? What I want to open with, and really at any point, just jump in, send something to chat. Again, I will measure success by how much we all talk to each other, not by getting through the slides. And if people are too quiet, then we'll stop and kind of really try to get people talking in an intentional way, because otherwise it's just boring.
Just to remind people, you're all muted, so make sure you unmute yourself if you start talking, or we're not going to hear you. You do it on the bottom left, I think. See where it says mute? Bottom left screen. Just click that and you're unmuted. Okay.
Great. So what I'm going to try to do to be good on time is do a very quick frame. This could be easily an hour, this one slide, but I want to just assume that to some degree we all get this general stuff. And the idea here is that everything is changing in the way that people relate to institutions, to organizations, to identity. It's not just Jewish, it's everything. It's newspapers, it's consumer products, it's sexual identity, it's ethnic identity. But the presumption here is that most Jewish organizations still work on a 20th century, an operating system built in the second half of the 20th century. And not only is that changing, but with the advent of technology, it's changing even more rapidly. And that these are things that when you lay out these 4 big boxes here, all 4 of these, I believe, are major threats to synagogues, youth groups, federations, JCCs, Hillels that operate on these older models. So the first 2 I'm going to do together, which is there's been by the way, I'm doing a webinar from home and our gutter guy just showed up. So you're going to see in the background out the window, our gutter guy cleaning the gutters. But there's been a huge shift, right, in America from an emphasis on macro community to micro community. In other words, or I'm going to add to that a shift from one size fits all to customization. The 2 easiest ways to see that is think about Ford in the 20s. Literally, Ford, the model was sell the exact same car to the largest number of people possible. The early Ford cars were all the same color. There was the Model T. That was it. Versus a Starbucks kind of economy where everything thrives on customization. And whether it's different apps on your phone or the iPhone itself or the way that you consume television shows or the way that you buy coffee, it is highly customizable. There's interesting evidence that shows that the reason Starbucks writes your name on the cup of coffee is not so that it gets to the right person, because they could have done, order number 3, order number 0568. It's to make you feel like that cup of coffee was made for you. And then the shift from macro community to micro community, I think a great example of this is in consumer products. Back in the 80s, when Air Jordans were big, important shoe brand, they were, 30, 40% of Nike's market share was one shoe, versus hit shoes today are operating in much smaller segments of the market. The best example of this is that in the 50s, when I Love Lucy was on television, 74% of Americans watched the exact same show at the exact same time on the exact same channel with the same commercials. That is an example of macro trend and macro community, right? Or if you wanted to be part of some political movement, you had to show up in real life with thousands of other people, right? And that shifted, and you can watch with television watching habits where after I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners, there's nothing like this. But the final episode of MASH in 1983 gets about 45% of the American population. Final episodes of Seinfeld in 1998 gets about 18% of the American population, right? And just keeps going down. Final episodes of Lost were 6%. Final episodes of Breaking Bad was 3%. The only outlier to this was the Super Bowl and was NFL football, and that has even begun to shrink since the book came out in 2016. So this whole idea of all Americans doing something at the same time with the same thing is changing. People want niche, customized brands. Even department stores are starting to get hurt by things like Stitch Fix, where you have a customized brand concierge person who puts together things just for you. So that's one dynamic. The last two are, there's been a huge shift from joiners to anti-affiliation, and from reliance on institutions to distrust of institutions. And the way that you see that is the kind of typical stuff quoted from the book Bowling Alone, from Robert Putnam. People spend less time outside, less time with friends, less time going to meetings or joining organizations of all varieties, whether it's religious or communal or, kind of the, I don't know, like what was it in the Flintstones? The Water Buffalo Lodge, like, in the 50s, people went to their Hairy Buffalo or the Water Buffalo Lodge, and now it's like doesn't exist. I don't know what the real life examples of those are, but like the 4-H club, or I don't know. My stepfather actually does this stuff. I'm blanking on the name, but it's like the only people who show up at those community organizations are in their late 70s and early 80s, right? And the same thing, it's a huge challenge for an idea of like join the youth group, stay affiliated with the synagogue, show up at this event, right? And the second thing is really interesting is that since the 1950s, people used to love institutions. And even you think about the way that like your parents or grandparents were brand loyal to like, I'm a Chevy man, right? Versus there's almost no brand in American life besides Apple where people are proud to identify with that brand. They're niche brands, right? Like high-end, status brands that people want to be associated with. But if it's for the masses, people generally speaking are not proud to identify with it. And what's really interesting is if you look in Pew Research, not about Jews, but just about Americans, when you look at baby boomers, if asked, generally speaking, can you trust people? Baby boomers, 43% of them said yes. Among millennials, it's 18%. It's a huge drop, right? And the idea here is not that millennials think that people are going to steal from them or mug them. It's that millennials don't trust institutions to get them. That there's a sense that institutions are there if you need them, but like you're not going to seek it out because they don't get me in a way that's nuanced or meaningful enough that I should be loyal to them. So all four of these things are kind of the four legs that the table of organized Jewish life function on. Everything we try to do is to get a lot of people to show, how do you know it was a huge successful youth group thing? Or how do you measure the success of your religious school? It's like, oh, we've got an increased number of students who are part of our program. And that's macro community. That's one size fits all. That is about joining or showing up. And that's about relying on the institution we think up great ideas to try to engage young people, and then we hope they show up. That's reliance on institutions for generations of people that tend to be less and less interested in showing up, trusting, doing things in large monolithic groups. So that's just to lay out some of the challenges. Anybody want to, before we move on, to react to that, push back, or to add some color or nuance that we might have missed? Okay, good. So second piece of theory, and then we're going to get into things that are much more practical, is that part of what I want to do with the book is destroy any language that is about one Jewish community. People are obsessed with it. Philadelphia Federation, until the new person took over, Naomi Adler, their tagline was one community, one campaign, one federation. And I think the giving rate in Philadelphia was under 10%. So every time we talk about the Jewish community and people internally don't feel like they're part of the community, we've only given them a binary choice of you're either in or out. And then most of those people feel like they're out. The other thing is most of the language we use to describe different types of Jews are, tell me if I'm right, but if you think about a planning meeting, right, for youth group or for the religious school or for some of the adult education stuff that you're trying to do, people tend to say things like involved and uninvolved, affiliated, unaffiliated, in-married, intermarried, active, not active. It's all of these linear judgmental spectrums. And there's a longer shtick here, but I'm just going to do the punchline, which is to say, I think that when Jewish organizations are deeply worried about how to get people from this side of the spectrum to be like us, the unaffiliated to affiliate, the uninvolved to be involved, which I think we are obsessed with because we're trying to fill our buildings, we're trying to make our numbers, we're trying to fulfill our budgets. It translates, and I actually think that people internalize that. The way that I've heard people express Jewish guilt who aren't Orthodox is around affiliation guilt. They're not guilty about what they believe. They're not guilty about what they do, the fact that they had a cheeseburger. They're guilty that they don't go enough, they don't show up, they used to be members, they're not members anymore, they used to donate, they don't do, right? And so there's real damage by using this kind of linear language. It makes people feel judged. And I think the other piece is it doesn't tell us a whole lot about those different populations. In other words, if the only thing we know about those people over there is that we're the core and they're the periphery, we're the engaged, they're the unengaged, that it means the only thing we're really offering them is to transform them into us. So one of the things I wanted to give different terminology here is that we propose this new language of engagement Jews and empowerment Jews. The mission is not to get engagement Jews to become empowerment Jews. The idea is that at the very least, to at least say that there are two different groups of Jews that have different stories, different needs, different assumptions. They live in different neighborhoods. They have different social groups. And that, and I'll define them in 1 second, but that you need to really reach them in two different ways. So empowerment Jews are people like us, through their upbringing, people who have high degrees of Jewish association, meaning they have lots of Jewish friends. They live in Jewish neighborhoods. If they work at a law firm, it might be the historically Jewish law firm in town as opposed to the historically not Jewish law firm in town, right? They seek out organized Jewish experiences. So when you move to a new community and you want to make friends, you want to make a life for yourself, you join a synagogue, you get involved in the Federation program. These freshmen, when they get to Hillel, show up at Hillel on the first Friday night. Empowerment Jews have long resumes of organized Jewish life experiences. So they did USY and NIFTY and BBYO, and they know about BDS, and they say things like, oh my gosh, did you read that article about BDS and JVP and the JTA? Engagement Jews feel just as Jewish as we do. 94% of American Jews feel positive or very positive about being Jewish. They just don't have the long institutional resume. They have lots of Jewish experiences with family and friends and grandparents and seders, but it's not with institutions. So when we're terrified about what's happening with BDS on campus, they don't know what that acronym means. When we're dealing with our organizations fighting about whether J Street is allowed to have a chapter in the Federation, they don't know what J Street is. And they don't care, and more than anything, they're turned off by all of those labels and all of that fighting. Engagement Jews, the definition is they tend to hang out with less Jews. So their friend groups, their neighborhoods, their places of work, the pool club they join are, generally speaking, much lower percentage Jewish. They don't seek out organized Jewish experiences. They feel that being Jewish is an immutable identity characteristic. They are Jewish. It's not about what they do or where they go. It's about who they are. And And sometimes engagement Jews do show up in organized Jewish life because they need something. They wake up when their kids are, I don't know, in first grade, and they say, oh crap, we need to get Johnny a bar mitzvah. And so they join temporarily to get a transactional item they need. Generally speaking, when they do show up, they feel like they don't get it. They don't feel included. They feel judged. They don't feel like they have the skills to be authentic in our organized Jewish spaces. And their little bit of time affiliating reinforces all the reason they don't want to affiliate, and they leave, right? This could even be, you know, for example, there's some teen who comes to one youth group event a year, and you know they got a deep Jewish soul and they want to do Jewish, but they just don't fit in with the kids who are already involved in BBYO or USY or NIFTY because they're an athlete, you know, and they're a varsity athlete and the kids in youth group aren't, or because the kids in youth group are cliquey and they're not part of that. It could be a million different barriers, but for whatever reason, when the people in the green show up in the orange, they don't love it. And so rather than having a one-size-fits-all approach, which says our job as empowerment Jews is to transform the green people to become the orange people, part of the critique of the book is if the people in the green bubble are really different and really have different Jewish stories and different Jewish needs, then our only answer can't be figuring out 400 different ways to get them to show up in our space and be like us. And I think that most Jewish organizations think they're doing many, many different entry points into Jewish life, but they're not. They are in the sense that, for example, we're going to pick on synagogues just for the moment. A synagogue will say, like, what are you saying? Of course we have multiple entry points. We've got a yoga minyan and a minyan and a prayer thing in the park. And we've got the traditional egalitarian service and the synagogue service. And we've got the men's club and the softball league and the sisterhood and the volunteer program. We've got the, you know, all these different ways. But if all of them are run by the 15% of empowerment Jews, and we keep trying to come up with great ways to get them involved or to not lose them after they are involved, it's all one size fits all. And really the only way to make it different is to say part of what we do, and you're going to see this in the rules for engagement. So I'll say it'll become very clear what this can look like. Good questions, comments, pushback. Everyone's been very quiet so far. I don't know if that means you're deeply interested or you're doing email. If you're catching up on email, that could be a good outcome of this webinar as well. But yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
I'm not sure I understood. Is the goal not to get the engagement Jews to the empowerment Jews, or it is, but it's to do it in a different way than what we're trying to do?
Yeah. So thank you. I totally blurred over that. In the most aggressive, provocative posture here, what I want to say is, it's about inverting the values pyramid. I think this is actually a slide somewhere. Forgive me if this makes you nauseous, but I'm going to skip through to the extra slides at the end. Yeah, whoop, there it was. Okay. What I think we normally do now, can you guys see my cursor floating here?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the way we normally do it. Even though not in our hearts, we know that the top of the values pyramid isn't about the institution. We know that it's really all about the deeper things, but the way we talk at our meetings is about membership, attendance, retention, right? And at the very bottom of the pyramid is what's good for the individual. And what I'm actually arguing is that an engagement orientation to the work we do isn't about getting more kids to do youth group, isn't about getting more kids to show up at Hillel, isn't about getting more people to join synagogues. It's about making Judaism more relevant, more important, more meaningful, helping individual Jews live more vibrant and meaningful and happy Jewish lives, to access the rituals, the wisdom, the text, the communities of Judaism, so that their lives are better, so that they're happier, healthier, better people. And the organizing theory here is if you get them in the institution, then we can get them connected to community, then we can help them live individual lives that are better. And I'm actually asserting a total reverse theory of change, which is make an individual impact so that they will seek out communities. I should change this slide. It should say communities here in the second tier, so that they then get involved, maybe not in institutions, but in organizations, right? And the dirty little secret, and there's real life proof here, is that if you focus on the institution, you won't get people to show up. If you focus on impact for the individual, they'll show up eventually. Eventually, they'll show up. But ironically, the more we focus on trying to recruit people to the institution, the harder it is to do that work, because we don't save ourselves enough time to focus on doing the things that are transformative for the individual, which is what really is going to get them to show up. Other questions, comments, clarifications?
Where did you get the numbers 85 and 15%?
I'm trying to think of the technical sociological term. I believe it's something like out of my tuchus. No, I'm being a little facetious. In other words, there's no way to quantify this. I try to spend a lot of time with Arnie Eisen, with Stephen M. Cohn to figure out what the numbers are. And they really were like, there's no way to quantify this. And in the book, I put 75-25, but there are some real reasons why, and I can share it with you if you want me to be more specific. The current affiliation rate for people joining synagogues over the course of their lifetime, according to the Pew study, was about 35%. Might have been 33%. But at any given moment, it's in the low 20s. The number of American Jews who send their kids to Jewish summer camp is, according to the Foundation for Jewish Camping, is 15%. The number of young people involved in youth programs is lower, is probably also about 15%. The number of American Jews who have a bar bat mitzvah ceremony corrected for Orthodox women who don't have it is only 50%. That means that the 50% of, if you had a bar bat mitzvah ceremony in a shul or with a rent-a-rabbi, you're still in the 50% most affiliated Jews in North America. And so my sense is that this is just a fair number. That, you know, if 22% of American Jews affiliate, or even if you want to go up to 35% of American Jews affiliate, we know that most people who belong to synagogues aren't actively Jewish. They're just buying the membership either out of some ethnic sense of obligation or because they need that bar mitzvah for sage, right? And I think the value of this language is not that it is sociologically provable or true, but that it is a consulting tool. It gives you simple ways to stop saying the Jewish community. And if you go, I mean, just try this, right? Go to one of the classes in one of your religious schools, and go to some group of parents in the religious school, or talk to a group of your youth groupers and find out what the right questions to ask are. But the way that I always do this for adults is, how many of you belong to a synagogue? How many of you have been to Israel before? How many of you have sent your kids to camp or went to camp yourself, Jewish camp? And when everyone, you know, it's 80 to 100% of the people in the room had a bar bat mitzvah, belong to a synagogue, have been to Israel, which is only 39% of American Jews. So if all the people in your planning sessions and all the people who are the consumers of your products, if they all fit, if 80, 90% of them fit the definition of empowerment Jews, this is really meant to just be a wake-up call of like, think about who you're missing over here in the green. And I meant the green for very real reasons. One is, I mean it to say it's opportunity, because look at how big it is. If we're fighting to retain, you know, I don't know, if all the synagogues in your neighborhood are fighting over the shrinking 15%, then it's very hard to move forward. But this is about possibility. It's also because there's money here. This can be engaging this group of 85 could be monetized in a way that would help sustain our youth groups, our religious schools, our camps, our Hillels, our synagogues. And here's the other thing I really want to say, which is so important about this diagram. I show you how little is overlapping between the 15 and the 85, just this little part in the middle. If I was a better graphic designer, I'd have the green kind of be shadowed here, right? But the reason I'm saying this is, with better programming, better marketing, better dues structures, better whatever, you could grow the 15% maybe to 85 to 25%, but you can't really reach engagement Jews through a program. Because they don't read those emails, they don't see those posters, they don't know the people, right? It's not, most of the people who are in this 15% live in their own little social networks. So they don't even, if you say, hey, bring some friends to the youth group event, most likely they will bring people who have similar Jewish backgrounds to them. So the only way to reach these people is to intentionally go out, meet them one-on-one, and then activate them. They're gonna, if you say to them, well, what could USY in this region do that might be attractive to you? They'll give you a whole bunch of ideas that are all bad ideas, and then they won't come to any of them, because they're not looking for programmatic involvement. What engagement Jews generally are looking for is to either they love Judaism, they want to do more, but they don't know what to do. They don't have access to the tools or the relationships to do more. Again, they don't want to join, they want to do more, right? They want to feel, or they want to resolve the tension between these feelings that like, I love being Jewish, I'm proud of being Jewish, I love Seder with my grandparents, and I feel guilty, insecure, and like I don't show up enough. So resolving that tension, this is the sweet spot over here for engagement Jews.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Being in Phoenix, I would say I don't know about most, but a good percentage of the engagement Jews here, I don't know that they care. I don't think that they know to care. I think that they mostly have not had an experience that excited them about being Jewish in any way, and they have no interest.
Right.
So, we just had an event bringing all the groups together to promote them, and we invited the teens and the parents, and it's a great event. But, my frustration with it is the wrong kids are in the room. I mean, it's great, and we want to engage those who are excited about being engaged, but how do we get to the people they're not even on the radar. We don't know where they are.
So Jennifer, I just want to say, I think that you're way ahead of the game if you already have that critique that the wrong people are in the room, because I think most people, even really good professionals, are saying, well, like, look, we had 50 people in the room. That's a success,
exactly.
right? But so I think that, so of this 85%, there is definitely a chunk that you cannot engage. And the way that I would define them is simply to say people who are totally ambivalent, I don't have any great answers, but how to engage them. But the process is something like this. It's closer to what the early wave feminists did when they went door to door, living room to living room, to have conversations with women, because the theory was if women felt satisfied with the gender roles that were in the 50s, where they stayed home, I'm not oppressed. My husband only beats me once a month. Things are great, right? I'm not oppressed. My husband gives me my allowance every week. He lets me buy the things that I want. They're not going to show up at a feminist event because they feel like, no, they'll say like, I'm proud to be Jewish. Things are great. I don't need you. So the way they did that in feminism, the way that all community organizing functions, is you have to needle around in their soul in a one-on-one way or in a small group way, not what kind of programs do you want, but to awaken them to just how pissed off they are, to awaken them to just, and this is the funny thing about it, means that the organized Jewish community has to help people become aware of how unsatisfied they are with the organized Jewish community. Pissed off Jews are the best asset we have. So what I would say is you go out, you meet engagement Jews one-on-one over coffee, at the gym, at a soul cycle class, whatever the right form of community organizing is for your group of people. And it's different in college than it is with teens, than it is with empty nesters, right? And you needle around, and really, if it's after an hour of talking about Jewish stuff, they really just don't give a crap, and they really say like, I'm not. And I think the way it would show up is, look, I'm not really Jewish. My grandfather was Jewish, but like, it's not. I don't even think of myself that way. I didn't have a bar. I don't have any Jewish baggage. I don't have any Jewish aspirations. I don't have any Jewish fears. I don't feel insecure. At that point, I'm not sure what to do there, right? But if you can get them to say like, I'm pissed off at my parents that they didn't force me to learn more when I was a kid. I'm pissed off at my hometown rabbi, my hometown youth group. I'm frustrated. I went to Hillel and they were mean to me, right? I try to read Jewish books and I don't even feel like I know enough to understand the books, right? Then you're off to the races. And so we're skipping to the punchline here a little bit, but the idea is that in addition to doing the good work that we do at the 15%, keep doing it, right? And then what I would even say is figure out a way and a strategic plan, to try to grow the 15% to 25%. Don't if let's use a youth group example as a model, just to make it really concrete. If you've got a good BBYO chapter, BBG chapter, citywide youth group chapter, USY, NIFTY, whatever label it is, and you got 100 kids, try to grow to 125 kids, right? When you talk to the board the student board. It's about who do you know that you could recruit to show up, right? But then in the purest form of this theory, what you would also do is recruit 15 other high school kids who would never be caught dead in your youth group, but who are cool, who live in the right neighborhoods, who are, who represent a connector social capital for the Jewish athletes in town, who have connecting social bridging capital to the Jewish lefties in town, to the Jewish students who live in this neighborhood who go to this high school that has a lower Jewish population, or to the kids in the private schools that have significant amounts of Jews who don't already show up, and recruit 15. Just again, you got a coffee date, right? You got to find out who, it's like typical networking. So someone who knows someone who knows them. And then you get them, again, I don't know what a coffee date looks like with a teenager exactly, but you find some way to do it, right? And then you recruit 15 teenagers who are never going to show up over here in the orange. You invest in them with like amazing leadership activities and Jewish learning that gets at the guts of what pisses them off and inspires them about Judaism. And then they do something once a month, right? They host basketball. They're in the athlete group, and they've got the best basketball hoop in the neighborhood, and they all come over Shabbos afternoon, and they get a bunch of guys playing basketball, and then they do Havdalah, right? And the idea is that you grow the 15%, and then you get 15 ambassadors or fellows or interns on the side. You pay them, you inspire them, and then you ask them, then they invite their friends over for Shabbat dinner once a month, whatever it is, right? It has to be deeply Jewish things. Jews playing basketball on Shabbat afternoon don't work when they're outside the confines of an institution or a youth group, because when a youth group does a basketball tournament, it's cool and it's good marketing for the youth group. But when 15 Jews just play basketball Saturday afternoon, it's just basketball. So it has to be basketball into Havdalah. It's got to be something into a book club, something into Shabbos dinner, something into Jewish community service, right? Because once you're outside the confines of the youth group or the Jewish institution, it has to be distinctively Jewish. And all the research shows that engagement Jews don't need the Jewish community to have basketball or to have a barbecue or to have a bar night. That's just life. If they're going to do something Jewish, the research is really compelling. They actually want it to be small, intimate groups with deep, distinctive Jewish ritual and or content. It even changes the Jewish learning. If you're going to do Jewish learning to try to attract new people to the 15%, the Jewish learning should be really open and easy and accessible to everybody. Here in the 85%, what it actually has to be is like, they don't want like, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Let's all talk about what it means to be nice in high school. They probably actually want something much more aggressive, which is you're a workaholic, you're addicted to your phone. Here is a Shabbat text that says you have to unplug 1/7 of your life. Or for example, there's some really interesting Musar texts that basically say there's this great thing from this guy, the Eish Kodesh, that says every time you feel the rumblings of insecurity or unhappiness inside of you, we distract ourselves by having a drink, by eating some food, by doing some menial tasks, AKA checking our phones. And that every time what you need to do is every time you feel that, you need to pause and lean into that thing that is making you uncomfortable and happy to learn from it. Because what the Eish Kodesh actually says is it's God calling out to you to tell you something about life. So ironically, when you're trying to get new people in the building, in the youth group, in the club, you lower the barriers to involvement. When you're trying to reach engagement Jews, it's through relationships, and you actually raise the barriers so that they feel like their little mini club, their micro community is super exclusive, super customized just for them. And it's got very vigorous either Jewish action or Jewish learning. And it's the same thing, just to go back to the TV analogy. I hope I'm not beating you guys over the head too much with the same ideas. But to have a hit show like MASH in the 80s, or to have a hit show like I Love Lucy in the 50s, it had to be parv, right? The goal was to get 70% of the market to watch it. Hit shows today don't need to be parv. You can go Game of Thrones and go full fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons nerdy, and you don't have to compromise that Game of Thrones is not targeting 70% of the population, even though it's a headline. I forget how many people are tuning in, but you're talking about 5 to 7% of the entire population is watching Game of Thrones, and yet it is culturally and economically significant. So the irony is that when we've done everything for a macro community, that's actually where people tend to feel pretty parv about it, because we're trying to satisfy all people with all things all at one time. And the beauty of micro communities and bringing Judaism, instead of trying to get people to come to us, bringing it out to them, is that we can meet them where they're at and in a way that we don't have to compromise, right? And it can actually be, people who want deep fantasy kind of stuff can watch Game of Thrones, and people who want sappy, feel-good stuff can watch, I don't know, I've never watched All of Us, right? But you don't have to compromise on it. You can just really target it for your group in the right way. I feel like that should have provoked some reactions. What are people thinking?
I can say, I can always talk. So I have so many things going on in my head. In our community, can you look at this from a communal standpoint, in that we have lots of different programs that can appeal to lots of different kids and interests, teens. So could we not look at this in that way, that, isn't there something for everyone? And if there's not something for everyone, we can, work to create that or make that connection within the organized community. Or is that too macro? We're still too macro.
I think it's too macro, because it's not about something for everyone. It's about, I'm going to show you this diagram. So something for everyone is this diagram, if you can see this on the webinar, which is leaders in here try to figure out what clients out there want. And you measure success by getting the most number of clients to show up. And maybe what you're talking about, Jennifer, is not one blue bubble, but many blue bubbles, right? This is the 3-on-3 basketball tournament for the youth group. And then another bubble is the community service project for the youth group. And then another bubble is the movie night for the youth group or whatever. But the idea is, what's missing about that is it sees the program is the connectivity, the offering of the institution from the leaders or from the professionals as the thing that attracts people, as opposed to the relationships. And this is the other diagram, right? Here, the job of the blue thing, which is not to get the green bubble to show up in the blue thing, but this is like the language we use, to unlock the power of social networks to do for themselves. So the only way there's a way to have multiple blue things. That's pretty easy. That's, I think, what you were hinting at, right? What's really hard to do is to have multiple green things, multiple individuals who become conveners and creators of Jewish community and of Jewish experience. And the only way, so what I would almost say is, rather than having laser tag in this paradigm, and I would say, what if you could use the power of the youth group to get there to be 20 laser tag clubs? And ironically, I would actually say it shouldn't be laser tag at that point, but that's a whole other, but you see what I'm saying? So the idea is, here is a group of 15 people on the board trying to figure out what cool events we can do to grow our youth group. Here is 15 different, instead of having 15 people all working on one thing, you have 15 people who meet here in the blue, and they each go out to their own social network, and they try to create something fully customizable for their group. And the success, you can see that success is measured here in much more complicated ways. Here, it's measured by the number of clients served and by the size of the organization. We say, we have the largest youth group of any synagogue in town. We've got 100 members, right? Here, it's measured by how many conveners of Jewish life have you fostered? How many yellow dots are they able to convene around them? And then see all these lines connecting everybody to each other. The goal is not here, all of the passive clients relate individually to the organization. And if you map out youth group events or federation events or prayer events, a lot of times what you see is it's not really a community gathering. It's either individuals or little cliques showing up together to partake of the service that's being provided by the institution. So you say like, oh, it's so wonderful. It's all to be here on Yom Kippur in one community. But if you actually mapped out the social networks, you would see it's not really one community. And a lot of people show up at Yom Kippur and feel like, I don't know anybody, and I don't feel included, and I don't feel connected in any way. And every year we do it, and we measure success by how many people showed up, or by how good my sermon was as a rabbi. And we're missing this important work of building community, right? Because what we're really doing is offering services at that point. But here, you have to find a way to measure the connectivity of how many of these yellow circles connect to each other. So if this is one of your youth ambassadors who creates these Havdalah club, and this is a Shabbat dinner club, and this is a community service club. So on Friday night, this person's hosting a Shabbat dinner. This Saturday night is hosting a Havdalah, and this on Sunday they're going to the soup kitchen. It's not just about how many people go, but about are there friendships and real community being created between them? Can you, as the youth group organizer, find ways to network weave this cluster of Friday night people with this group of Havdalah people, with this group of Sunday soup kitchen people, right? And then if you can, then what you have to do to monetize this is track all of this stuff happening outside of the blue circle. Survey them a little bit to figure out, are you actually helping them increase the number of Jewish friends they have? Are you increasing Jewish knowledge? I'll show you the slide here, right? These are the metrics, these 4. Is this work you're doing creating a positive Jewish memory? Is it increasing Jewish knowledge? Is it increasing Jewish self-confidence? And is it connecting people to other Jews? All of these there's a whole chapter about why each of these is important, but these are 4 metrics. I didn't come up with them, that I think are incredible. So it's not this was awesome. We had a huge number of people show up to go see the new Avengers movie as part of our youth engagement, or we found a way to keep more people after bar and bat mitzvah in the religious school. Is being part of the religious school doing these much deeper impact things. And the theory is that you will retain them because of the impact, not because of the marketing.
But is the goal that these different convening groups on the outside, that ultimately they are connected to the youth group, ultimately are brought in, or we're happy that they're doing what they're doing where they're doing it, as long as they're getting those 4 things?
Yeah. So Jennifer, you and I were having it's like you're interviewing me and we're getting through the whole PowerPoint. It's perfect. This is amazing. I hope other people are enjoying it. But so the way that I really think about this is depicted here, where just like in the calendar, we have both Yom Kippur and Passover. I think that programmatically we need both also. And Yom Kippur over here in this image, again, I'm going to just push us through this, as opposed to, you could facilitate this, by the way, with your leadership groups. Like, what gets you into a Yom Kippur service? Who's in charge of what happens at a Yom Kippur service? What's the relationship of the people attending, right? But the punchline of all of that is it's an institutional relationship that gets you into an event like this. It's a ticket, a membership, the synagogues in your neighborhood. You heard the rabbi gives great sermons, your friends belong, right? The people in charge of the event are people with titles, either board titles or professional titles. The power of the event is that it's large and we're all doing it together, but most people don't walk out of Yom Kippur services feeling like, wow, that really met my individual needs. It's nearly impossible to customize it. But a Yom Kippur paradigm is what gets you in as a relationship. Someone invites you. Every Seder is totally customizable. The gap between leader and participant is dramatically less formal and less far away. Ironically, the most widely produced book in Jewish history is the Haggadah, because this is what happens when you unlock the power of social networks to do for themselves. And think about, no one's happy about buying a membership or buying a ticket, but people get really excited about the new Haggadah they buy for the Seder that they're investing all this energy to figure out what to do with. It shows you some of the different psychology involved in these paradigms. Just like both of these things are in the calendar, I want both of these things to be in the organized Jewish community, but I think that 90% of what most Jewish organizations do runs on the Yom Kippur paradigm. Every youth group program where you come up with a great idea and blast it out and try to get people to show up, every attempt you have to retain people in a religious school, every attempt to get more people to join your synagogue, every speaker event, every Federation Gala event is all in the Yom Kippur paradigm. But this ambassador thing that I laid out to you is this. So this over here, the Yom Kippur paradigm, is what you need to sustain people's Judaism. It's what you need to feel like part of a bigger Jewish community. And the power is being all together, and you need that. It's an essential part of a religion or a movement. It doesn't matter if it's a religion or Apple. Apple once a year needs to get together and have their big unveiling, right? But Jewish growth, generally speaking, happens more in the Seder paradigm. It's either really, it tends to be family, Shabbat dinners, Passover Seders, Israel trips, camp, deeply immersive experiences, right? Or a relationship, a rabbi, an educator, a youth advisor, a camp counselor taking an interest in you and investing in you. But generally speaking, this is not a growth moment. This is a sustaining moment. And the dirty little secret is, if you do a really good job with a lot of these, about a third of these people are going to show up more often here anyway.
Mike.
Yeah.
If I can jump in for a second, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a way for a lot of the people on this call to contextualize it is sort of in the building versus out of the building. So the people who show up for those things inside the building are your empowerment Jews, and the ones who don't show up in the building but may do something else that doesn't look like or resemble what's going on in the building are those engagement Jews. And it may even be that you don't brand those out of building experiences with your brand for the inside, because that could be a turnoff if we go back to the beginning and talk about, not wanting to affiliate, etc. So just to kind of think of it that way, but we can still count them. I think that's the big thing, is that we're all getting funding, we're all getting support. We can all justify our jobs by the number of people or the number of things that we're doing. And so there's still a way to count to meet that need while making it look very different for the people who need it to look different.
Great. I think it's really important that you clarified that. I think there are examples of synagogues now that run USY and run a shadow youth group that has no brand. It's just 15 ambassadors getting people who would never go to USY to do stuff. The second thing I wanted to say is, this change is as radical. Think about if we were a music company that sold CDs, and then all of a sudden MP3s come on the market and people can stream and can download illegally. And we think this is the end of music. It's not. It's the end of CDs, but not the end of music. And if we can go back to our core mission and say our job is to get music in the hands of as many people as possible, then we get to count all this stuff. And that's actually what happened, right? For a while, it looked like the music business was going to be destroyed by MP3s and file sharing, but they figured it out, right? So now it's not buying a CD, it's buying a song on iTunes or selling subscriptions through Amazon Prime or through Spotify where people stream music. But the music industry is again making insane amounts of money. But it's because they were able to realize it wasn't about the CDs, it was about the music. And for us, it's not about membership or showing up, it's about Judaism. The second caveat I want to say is a lot of times these ideas in the building, out of the building get weakened because it's like, well, great. So instead of having adult ed in the building where there's a Torah study class with the rabbi, we're going to do Torah at the tap where the rabbi goes to a bar. And then what happens is the same 15 people who would have come to the shul to learn with the rabbi go to the bar, but now you're at a bar, so it's noisy, and actually the quality of the Jewish conversation probably weakens, and you didn't actually reach anybody new. So it's not just in the building, you said it in a very nuanced way, which is it's the populations that would show up. That's the important piece. So the way that again, none of this is in the book. These 5 rules aren't explicit in the book. But I think the key is it seeking model or receiving model? Receiving model is we come up with an idea in the building or out of the building. We market it and we see who shows up at the coffee house, at that laser tag event, right? Or is it where you're seeking, where you are bringing the Judaism to the house they live in, the social network they live in, the neighborhood they live in? You're bringing it to where they are. And allowing, just like a Seder isn't about the synagogue hosting the Seder in your house as a way of engaging you. It's you hosting your own Seder. So I think, these 5, we actually covered all 5 rules of engagement in a circle as opposed to a straight line. But the first critique is this new program idea that you came up with, is it about getting people to show up, or is it about seeking people out where they are, right? The second rule, which we kind of already did, are you finding ways to add Seder models to your existing Yom Kippur models? Is it fueled by program, or is it fueled by relationship, right? And is it you doing it for them, or is it you unlocking the power of social networks to do for themselves? And we even did rule number 5, which is shadow branding. If the brand of your organization isn't going to be helpful in getting more Judaism to happen, so do it through your brand and do it without it. Do whatever you need to do, beg, borrow, and steal, because the mission isn't the religious school, the USY chapter, the high school, the adult ed program. The mission is more Jews doing deep, meaningful Jewish stuff together. And the reason you have a youth group is to get teens to do Jewish together, right? And I don't mean silly Jewish, I mean real Jewish, right? So we actually, in an awesome way, covered the whole thing in a circle as opposed to a straight line. I'm happy to hang out for a few more minutes. I know we're at time. If there's more conversation or questions, I'm happy to spend an extra few minutes. Do you want to, I'll turn it back to you, Erica, to facilitate how you want to facilitate.
No, fantastic. If we have, 2 more minutes, if anybody has any questions, comments, I was just about to tell you you're out of time, but you're right. Everything was gotten to, just in a different way than imagined. And I think that's probably the perfect metaphor to what we're talking about today, which is getting to where we want to go, which is engaging more more teens in Jewish life and Jewish learning and Jewish experiences without necessarily putting them on that straight and narrow path that sometimes we get stuck on. Any other questions, comments? I think, Susan.
Well, I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I just loved hearing everything you had to say. My silence was more my brain just sort of trying to wrap my head around everything, and how do I translate this to my school, and how do I do this just being, me, and there's a lot of challenges, and just gave me a lot of food for thought, how I proceed forward. So thank you.
So I know we do tend to jam a lot into a webinar. It's mostly meant to start the conversation, but the book goes much deeper and more methodically. And there's also, it's designed almost, it's not a workbook, but like every chapter has you could really use the questions at the end of every chapter to work with a leadership group to facilitate like your own visioning and thinking on it. And the book is cheap. It's like, if you buy it through the publisher, 10 copies or more, it's $9.50 a copy. So it's like, it was designed to be kind of like a workbook that you could do as someone said that they do a lot of leadership development stuff like this or professional development. It's really designed to be both like theoretical and practical, and also usable even without the author in the room.
It looks like Deb and maybe Paula have, yeah. Okay, Deb, you want to start?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. So much of what you were saying was resonating with me in terms of it's not the numbers, but it's how we engage and how deeply we could. we can motivate not just our teens, but the youth professionals who I'm working with. It's about the relationships. I kept thinking like this is the Havurah model of the 70s, and like just thinking about how the more we empower everybody to go out and do this in the way that's meaningful to them and so on and so on and so on.
Thank you. I think there is one difference though between this model and the Havurah movement of the 70s is that most of the way that the Havurah movement worked and most of the innovations in the organized Jewish world are about improving the experience of people who've already sought out some kind of affiliation show up. In other words, the Havurah movement in the 70s was like, there's 2 versions of it, right? But one version was, how do you take people who already belong to a synagogue and put them into groups so that they're not relating anonymously? And the other was independent minyanim, but those mostly served people who were already seeking out Jewish experiences for themselves. And so my one slightly more aggressive push here is, this actually is about seeking people outside of the boundaries who haven't sought you out, who don't already affiliate, and then bringing Judaism to them.
In a way that is going to be engaging and meaningful to them.
Totally.
Thank you.
Paula, you've got the last say.
Okay. I'd be interested, Erica, in continuing this conversation, maybe as opportunities for us to brainstorm and think, okay, what can I do for my organization, for my school, whatever? How do I implement, like to read the book and then to talk about like what can I do? Do you know what I'm saying? Like to brainstorm ideas. So I'm like thinking, okay, would this work? Would that work? Like, who do I use? You know what I mean?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, and these are great opportunities also that we can have as a continuing conversation on our virtual professionals meetups too, to really do some of that strategy and digging. But as I said, I read the book. I wrote all over the book. I loved it. It's very interesting and engaging. You will not get bored at all, and you'll zoom right through it. And it really helps you think, regardless of what situation you're in and who you're working with. It really helps you imagine and pushes you to reach beyond where you already are, knowing how important it is to, that there is that huge number of teens that nobody's touching, nobody's tapping into, and how can we make Judaism relevant to them in a way, that benefits the larger community. All right, Mike, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So good to see you.
We very much appreciate you being here with us. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, I'm sure that Mike will, be happy to take some emails. So let me know if you've got questions. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, and we'll send the slides around to I'll send it to Erica so she can send it around to everybody.
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.